Tell us why John Kent's Superboy is a hero who happens to be bisexual, which, in comics we know means gay because he's never going to be with a woman again. There'd be too much of an outcry from 12 people on Twitter, and DC can't handle it. Tell us why he's a hero. Tell us why, and don't give me this modern day, like, oh, he's fighting climate change. Great. I mean, climate change does belong in comic books because it is fiction. But let's not build our entire superhero story around it.
This week we got probably the stupidest article in the history of comic books from CBR.com, courtesy of David Harth, a favorite of the channel for stupid opinions. This is the guy that said Punisher fans only liked him because he was wiping out minorities in the 70s and 80s, which never actually happened. He thinks it's time for more slice of life comic books because the backups in Wonder Woman have got everyone intrigued, Aaron.
David Harth, look, I mean, I know who this guy is. This guy just wants a job. He's trying to get a job at Marvel and DC, so he is just, he's just, what do they say? What's the Shawn Michaels thing? He's just doing the service that they're asking for. He's juggling the balls. This is a terrible take. David Harth is full of terrible takes. Like I said, he's just a guy just trying to get a job so that he can also write some terrible slice of life comic books that no one will read. And it's really dumb. All we get is slice of life. So no, we don't need more. We get slice of life in our superhero books. You know what the industry needs? Some superhero books, some goddamn adventures, adventure titles. They need some exciting things going on. Heroes doing heroic things, women doing heroic things, both men and women being sexy while they're doing it so that it can fire our imaginations. We need robots. We need death rays. We need adventure and things that are actually interesting within the Western comic book adventure sphere. The last thing we need is more people sitting around in stupid diners having stupid conversations about their stupid feelings while eating stupid cheesecake.
I couldn't agree more, Aaron. And this is how David starts it out. Trinity is a new character created for the story and was even given a feature in the book. This backup deals with John Kent and Damian Wayne babysitting the young Trinity in extremely entertaining stories by Tom King and artist Belen Sanchez. These little slice of life stories with superheroes have made fans wish that American superhero comics would tell more stories like this. Slice of life manga and anime are quite popular, and many superhero fans would love to see their favorite heroes in more grounded stories, ones that don't involve fighting villains, but navigating the world with superpowers alongside their closest friends and family. The big difference that I think he's missing out in is manga and anime have their own niche genres within that tell those kind of stories. They don't try to tell slice of life in fucking My Hero Academia. My Hero Academia for an entire issue isn't them sitting at a table talking about their feelings.
Well, listen, you can immediately disregard everything that this guy said because the words Tom King and very entertaining should never appear in the same sentence unless the word isn't appears between them to break them up. What a ridiculous thing to say. Okay, so great. You're entertained by these things. You're one of the 3 people that's entertained by Tom King telling slice of life stories. Great. That's not a sustainable business model for the rest of the industry. And it's been proven time and time and time again. But again, disregard everything David Harth says because he's just sucking up to try to get a job at Marvel or DC.
Yeah, we've seen Rainbow Rowell coming aboard on She-Hulk, which isn't a superhero book anymore. It's a slice of life book. And basically it doesn't have sales. And it hasn't had sales the entire time that she's been on it. We saw Mariko Tamaki. I believe they do the exact same thing with She-Hulk. We've seen them attempt to do this for years upon years at this point, and it's never actually worked out. But for some reason, I guess if you just proliferate the lie over and over again, you just believe it or you expect other people to believe it, even though there's absolutely zero empirical evidence supporting the claim.
I mean, you're absolutely right. They keep trying to gaslight us, and perhaps they eventually get to a point where they gaslight themselves into believing this. Certainly, you can have slice of life within your story. Within your superhero story, the very best issues of Amazing Spider-Man that I think that David Michelini wrote always involved like a slice of life element. Peter's dating life, Peter teaching at the college, just those little things. But they were peppered in, and they were garnishes to the main course. The main course always being the superhero drama, the big villain fights, the big villain plots. That's always what drove the book, and the other things were there just to season the story. That's where it needs to stay. Slice of life should never be the main course within American superhero comics.
Absolutely. He continues on. Superman had Lois, Jimmy Olsen, and Perry White, and Shazam had the Marvel family. However, most of their stories still dealt with their superheroic adventures, with their lives outside being heroes, mostly just acting as set dressing. Books like Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen and Superman's girl Lois Lane were the closest that readers had to slice of life comics back then, but there wasn't much realistic about the antics that the characters got up to in those two books. But you know what else was really lacking with those two books? Longevity and sales. They put the slice of life stuff back in the 70s and 60s and stuff out there. It didn't work then. They tried slice of life again in the 90s. It didn't work then. And they're doing slice of life stuff again in the 2020s and 2010s and all that stuff, and it's not working now. You can say the interest is there, but all evidence suggests that it has never actually worked in American superhero comic books.
Well, and let's be honest, the people that they're hiring to write these slice of life stories haven't really lived any life. They've lived a very simple, very trite, very easy life, within the modern American experience, which is the easiest life that anybody has ever had ever in the history of the world. This is the most, for all our turmoil and for everything that's going on politically and all of the unrest and all of the dissatisfaction and all of the depression that is going on in the country, and they're all related, in my opinion. And I could make a pretty solid case for that. But, all of those things that are going on, it's all boring. You have people who are 20-somethings. They've never really done anything of interest. They've grown up in a very narcissistic and self-absorbed time of social media. And that's what permeates the stories that they write. You can hand Danny Lore any slice of life, story that you want, say, write this story, and it's going to be bland and it's going to be uninteresting because they are bland and uninteresting. Comics used to be written by men who had gone to war, by women like Ann Nesenti, who had lived life and worked their way up through the trenches and lived in New York and had all these experiences that they could draw from. The people that they're hiring now have none of that. And so even if you could tell a good slice of life story, we're not going to get it, not from this pool of writers.
There have always been slice of life within comic books. The Amazing Spider-Man was not always only about Amazing Spider-Man. It was also about Peter Parker and his relationship with his Aunt May and him juggling girlfriends and not being able to make it to the date on time and what he and Harry are doing in college and MJ and Gwen Stacy. And certainly in Superman, you did have Lois Lane. Back in the day, there was a time when you read a Batman comic book, there would be Bruce Wayne in there, and he would have his sidekick, he'd have his butler, he would have a life, he'd be trying to date a woman, not let her know that he was Batman. And those things have always been within superhero comic books, but they were the things that enhanced who the character was and kind of offered more stakes to the story. But you can't even do that anymore because people like Gail Simone came into comic books and said, hey, you can't introduce a female character and not let her be a hero. And you certainly can't introduce a female character and let her die. A love interest or a relative within a comic book story, you're frigid. So now you can't really even do a lot of the stuff you did back in the day to where you would be able to raise up the stakes and ratchet up the tension by developing a relationship and then putting that person in jeopardy because you'll offend people then.
These slice of life things were always baked into the Marvel formula. It's what Stan Lee, when he looked at DC, he said, these characters are larger than life. They're largely portrayed as gods. I want to do, stuff where the heroes have actual problems. And that's where he and Kirby and Ditko, they went on to create all these great characters and all these great worlds, where you had characters who had these conflicts. But high adventure and tales of heroism and the hero's journey, those were always the main focus. Everything else is a garnish, is a seasoning, and it should be there. But it can't be the focus, not in these types of books. You want to do a slice of life book, go to Boom, go to, Aftershock or whoever's still left standing that does those types of things. Go to Black Mask and tell your story about being a gay man dating in LA. And it'll find a very small niche audience because it's a very small niche book. And if you get enough hype, maybe you can get enough readers to keep that sustainable, and more power to you. I'm not saying that book shouldn't exist. I'm saying that book should not exist within a superhero book and replace all of the superheroics that should be in that book.
His next supporting argument, Webtoon is a South Korean website mobile app that publishes comics, manga, and manhwa. Webtoon has become one of the world's biggest independent comic reading apps and has a huge selection of great comics. DC chose to publish Batman Wayne family adventures on the app to tell the story of the Waynes hanging out and living their lives. The Webtoon became hugely popular among fan bases that didn't always read big two superhero comics, making it a huge crossover hit. DC has since started publishing the comic in physical form and has even started to put more of its characters on the app. On top of that, DC also has a huge YA line of graphic novels starring teen DC heroes living their lives, going to school, and falling in love. And I think the thing he's missing on this one is when you go to Webtoon, how much do you pay for those comic books?
Yeah.
You don't. They're free. That's what Webtoon is. That's the draw and the appeal of the thing. Yes, they have published these things out in physical form. The Wayne Family Adventures don't show up on any of the best-selling lists. It doesn't show up on the best-selling graphic novels. It doesn't show up on the best-selling comic books. Because while there is a huge audience for it on Webtoon where it's free, when you actually have to pay for it, it hasn't exactly worked out.
No, and this audience that they keep chasing doesn't spend money on things. They pirate, they read it for free, they go to the bookstore. I'm sure that any that found their way into the bookstore have been read, because I'm sure that crowd goes in there and sits down on the floor and reads the entire book and then puts it back on the shelf. But they don't buy it. And so then the bookstore clearances it out or throws it away when it doesn't even sell on clearance, and then doesn't order anymore. It is completely unsustainable. The slice of life crowd, if they're buying manga. They're not buying American comic books. They're reading it for free.
And me personally, I think Webtoon is the perfect place to put the She-Hulk book at Marvel Comics right now. That's where it belongs. It belongs to that audience that don't want to actually pay for comic books, and it's a waste of time printing it out in paper and trying to charge people $4 or $5 for it. This is where Batman Wayne Family Adventures should be. It should be on Webtoon. It should be offered for free because it is slice of life. And when people think about DC Comics superheroes, they want to see superheroics. I don't fault them for actually producing this stuff, and I think they found the right avenue for it. But then to also mention, well, they have a huge line of YA graphic novels. Well, I don't know if you've noticed this, pal, but YA graphic novels are selling like hotcakes. Guess what's not on any of the lists for the bestsellers? Raven loves Beast Boy. Beast Boy loves Raven. None of those books are on there. Gotham,
none of those things.
Academy. I Am Not Starfire. Whatever the stupid Wonder Woman was. I can't remember all the stupid names of them. There is no interest in these books amongst that audience either.
My Aqualad, My Love is an Ocean, or whatever that was.
Exactly.
All of this stuff. Tom Taylor's John Kent's Superman. Megan Fitzmartin's Robin book. All of those should not be put out into the direct market. They should be for free on Webtoons. That's the crowd that'll read them. You won't make any money on it, but the crowd will read them.
That's the place that people go for stories like that. And yes, if you do a good enough job
for lame free stories, go to Webtoon.
If you do a good enough job and you build up enough audience, eventually you can make some money on that. Solo Leveling is the best example. Of course, Solo Leveling isn't a slice of life book per se. It's more like sci-fi and stuff like that. But you can build up an audience there, and that's where it should be. And then, they've really botched this entire YA graphic novel line. A vast majority of people looking for DC characters for their kids aren't looking for LGBTQ coming of age books. They just aren't. Kids aren't interested in that stuff either. They want some superheroics. They want some fucking action.
Yeah, no, kids aren't interested in that unless they've been conditioned by their parents to be interested in it. Or had that thrust upon them. You can find some teens. You can certainly find that audience, but you're finding an audience. You just got to recognize you're finding an audience that largely does not have money. And even if they do have money, that's not what they're going to spend it on.
Finally, he says, Trinity's childhood adventures with Damian Wayne and John Kent have grabbed readers' attention. This backup story could have easily shown a more conventional superhero story with Damian and John training Trinity to fight evil, take her on a patrol, and things of that nature. And while there is some of that, the true highlight of the story is watching the young princess play with her older brothers as they struggle to keep up with the energetic little girl. Every parent who reads this backup recognizes what's happening, and everyone who babysat has had the same experience. This comic rings true for everyone who reads it and uses what readers know about Damian and John to inform the story. The big problem is nobody actually buys Wonder Woman for that backup story at all. That's not what the cover price is for. It's actually for a Wonder Woman comic book. And the sales on that series are declining because it's been a bad Wonder Woman series.
And look, it's Tom King. The sales are gonna drop, and they're gonna drop rapidly because people are gonna start reading it. And nobody's talking about those backups really. No, nobody's. There's no buzz. There's no buzz for anything.
I get a lot of comments. No one talks about that.
No, there's no buzz for anything in comics right now. Even Ghost Machine, which is putting out some really good books and really different books, with fantastic art. There's not a huge buzz to that. There's publishers that come in and they make a big announcement, and they get promoted by Heidi McDonald to the 12 people that pay attention to what she has to say. And like Distillery, they come in and it's just it's just a wet fart. There's no excitement about comics in general because Marvel and DC are so terrible right now. DC in particular, I think they didn't even have a book in the top 20 this month, according to our highly estimated comic book numbers, but not even in the top 20. But hey, go to Jim Lee's.
Counted like in the previous month.
Yeah, well, go to Jim Lee's.
The counting was weird.
Go to Jim Lee's Instagram, and there he is, like, here I am with some comic legends, Todd McFarlane and Mark Silvestri, and we're having lunch. It's like, yeah, sure would be nice if you were that interested in making sure that DC Comics was healthy.
And I would say, based on what I've read, my reaction and hearing from people, that one of the things that drove people away and one of the reasons they walked away is the proliferation of slice of life bullshit. In lieu of actually having superheroics happening in the comic books. There's nothing wrong if you're reading X-Men. Where's Claremont? You start out at one place, the team breaks up, you end up on 2 different continents, they finally end up back at the mansion after 18 issues, and they fought all these villains or whatever. Then you get a slice of life, a baseball game to be like a little palate cleanser and set things up on the very final page reveal of whatever the next villain's going to be.
You go to the mall for an issue, but you had 24 issues of really intense storyline before that. And, even like the mall thing can pay off some of the little character moments that you've done along the way, your love triangles, your things like that you've built up throughout the stories of them going on adventures and them, facing down villains. But we're here for action adventure. We're here for villains. We're here for plots. We're here for all of this conflict. We're not here for, I don't want to read about how rough Kitty Pryde's job as a barista is because there's a guy that works there that doesn't like her and doesn't like mutants. And so they have work conflict. Like he's hiding the foam from her so she can't properly make the lattes and customers are getting mad at her. I don't care about that. That is a complaint that someone that would be giving you about their job. And you would be like, you'd be like nodding and listening and trying to be empathetic, but your mind would be wandering as they were talking because it just does not, mean that much to you. It doesn't mean that much in the grand scheme of things. We come to comics for big ideas and big plots and big stories, of just, bigger than, larger than life characters just doing really cool things. We don't come for like the mundane slice of life moments that we all have to live through. Comics are supposed to be escapism.
You know what else I don't come to comic books for? These stupid fucking backups in all the major DC titles that they throw another $1 onto the cover price so they can give you eight pages of story that you never asked for to begin with. Almost all their backup stories are terrible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, because they're only making another $1 on it, so they're not hiring the best people to come in and write backup stories. It's like all the Pride books, like how often do you get a Pride story that matters, that actually means something in the larger scheme of things in one of those anthologies? You don't. It's just always the same thing. Here's a story about somebody being mean to them because they're LGBT, and then they have a triumphant moment, and then we'll see these characters again in a year when we do another Pride anthology. But until then, they won't be in any books and they won't matter. And, they won't have any actual superhero adventures and no one will ever connect to them. It'll just be something that we put out once a year. Instead, they should be, using those to tell a great adventure story with that character. They keep going back to the well with this, where it's like, this is what it's about. It's about slice of life. It's about being LGBT. It's about this, this real world thing. This is what it's about. That just needs to be something that exists within the adventure story that you're giving us. Tell us why John Kent Superboy is a hero who happens to be bisexual, which, in comics we know means gay because he's never going to be with a woman again. There'd be too much of an outcry from 12 people on Twitter, and DC can't handle it. But tell us why he's a hero. Tell us why, and don't give me this modern day, like, oh, he's fighting climate change. Great. I mean, climate change does belong in comic books because it is fiction. But let's not build our entire superhero story around it. It's not interesting. Give me something that the character can punch. I know that's an anathema to Tom Taylor, who bragged that there was no punching in his comic book. But then again, no punching in your comic book is probably why nobody read it and it stopped being published.
I do want to say thank you very much to Aaron for joining me today. If you like the conversation we're having, there's like an extra hour and 45 minutes, 2 hours of this live right now on Think Critical Patreon. The Geek Fix podcast on Think Critical Patreon every single Wednesday. If you haven't checked that out, there's a link in the video description.